Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer on a mission to help you use the adversity in your life to grow and help you become the best version that you can possibly be. I am joined today and every day by my producer, Aaron Bender.
Well done. I was messing with the whole monitor here and was like, oh, she can't see me. Oh, but she can. I've moved the light yet again.
Again, yes. That's why the lighting's never quite right, because you're always moving it.
Viewers don't care. Why am I even bringing that up? I don't know. But did you imagine 15 years ago when you started this firm, you're like, you know what? The lighting in my podcast studio is going to be weird.
No, I didn't imagine that. That was never even like in my consciousness at all.
Quick question, though, in terms of starting the firm, because we've got Mike Konrad, the reluctant entrepreneur, in studio today here in a couple of minutes. A quick question about starting the firm. Was that always the plan? Was like how long had you been a lawyer when you even just decided, okay, I'm gonna go out on my own?
Yeah. So I had been a lawyer for a few months. My plan. Okay, so my dad has
Hold on, rewind a second. A few months.
Yeah, a few months.
Is that normal? Are you normal?
We know that I am definitely not normal. We're probably not normal. I mean, that is like a foregone conclusion for sure.
But a few months though, is that normal?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. And my plan was always to like work at a firm for 5 or 10 years, learn how to be a lawyer, and then start my own practice, because I always knew I wanted to own my own business. My dad owned his own business, and so I kind of already had that in my DNA. But I never, ever thought I would do it like a few months in. But circumstances at the time just sort of like led me to do that. And as I sit here today, I would say like it's the best thing I've ever done. But I got to say, when I was reading Mike Konrad's book, I was filled with anxiety for the first half of it, because he's talking about all the stuff that he went through in building his business that he started back in the 90s. And has now been going on for over 30 years. And it reminded me of all the stuff that I went through in getting, this business off the ground. And it is not for the faint of heart. We are joined today with Mike Konrad, author of The Reluctant Entrepreneur, a book that goes through his journey of building his business and all the pitfalls along the way. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me. It's my honor to be here.
Yes. So let's just jump right in. You have had, I think, like pretty much every entrepreneur on the planet, you've had sort of a long and windy road to where you are now. Tell us a little bit about your business now, today.
Sure. Well, it's funny you say like every entrepreneur on the planet. We all think our journey is unique. And then we get together,
Yes.
over a beer or whatever, and we've realized that like you too,
Yes.
we're part of a club.
Right.
My business today, we're in the electronics manufacturing industry, which means we build equipment that makes all the electronics that are around you right now. Right. The cameras and the microphones. Our industry builds all this stuff, and we're in a very specific niche within that ecosystem.
Okay.
So we're an equipment manufacturer that are behind the scenes, that consumers would never even know existed.
Yeah.
It's all B2B. It's manufacturing.
Okay. And today, business is thriving, right?
Yeah. After 33 years, yes, it's doing well.
Okay. And so how many employees do you have?
We have about 40 or so employees. We're a small company.
Yeah. And you're based
by design.
Right. Yeah. We'll get into that. Yeah. And you're based in Southern California.
Yes.
But you basically, like, your products are worldwide.
Yeah. We sell on 5 continents right now.
Okay.
Actually 6 continents. If global warming continues and Antarctica defrosts, then maybe we could be on the final continent. But we're global.
Okay. So, and you started this business in the 90s, right?
I started it in 1992, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you write this book?
I started writing it about 5 years ago. And you wouldn't know it by the number of pages, but I started writing it more. I was speaking a lot on entrepreneurship and business at universities and some other gigs, and I would tell stories, and the more I started speaking, the more stories I remembered, because we've been in business 33 years, right? So there's a lot of stories, a lot of foxhole stories, which I've long forgotten. And so some of the memories started coming out, and I should write this down because these are good stories. And I thought I'd write them down so I wouldn't forget them, so I could use them as, anecdotes when I do my speaking stuff. And so I started writing it down, and then I started throwing context in there. It started with bullet points, and then I thought, well, I'm going to write the whole event, whatever the story was, the before and after. And then I just started stringing them together, and then someone suggested you should write a book. And so I thought, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I've expressed what I do in so many forms, and webinars and podcasts and public speaking and technical writing, for geeky electronics magazines. But I've never really written like a nonfiction, book. I'm like, oh, I'll try that. Not with necessarily the intent to publish it, but just more of a therapy. It was cathartic to write it, right? So I just started writing it, and after several months of writing, I stuck it on a shelf, and 6 months later or so, I pulled it off the shelf and looked at it and said, oh, this part's great. And this part, what was I thinking when I wrote this part? This part sucks. So I'd rewrite it and then stick it back on a shelf. And after a few years, I thought, okay, it's time to do something with it. And the question I asked myself is, other than me enjoying reading it, I'm my number one fan, does it provide any value? So I gave it to a few friends, and I said, look, do you think that are in business? And I said, do you think this would provide value? Do you wish you had read something like this when you got started, or does any of this ring a bell? And I got some positive feedback and made a few changes and said, okay, click publish. And that's what I did.
Okay. Well, you talked about how it reminded you of the stories, kind of like thinking about it, doing your speaking gigs, writing things down, and then more stories started coming to mind. So I will share with you, when I was reading the book, the first half gave me so much anxiety because it reminded me of all my stories. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have locked that away in the vault to survive as a defense mechanism. I have forgotten about all of those sort of pitfalls.
Now you need therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Hopefully the last half is the therapy, right?
Yes, very much so. But it was just funny that you said that and that you want to remember those stories, because I'm like, I definitely want to forget those. Right. But yeah, that's definitely what came to mind when I, in the first half of the book, as I was like, oh my God, I forgot about how hard it can be and how it's like, pushing a sled uphill sometimes. Yeah. And you had a lot of stuff happen. I mean, some of the stuff I was like, yep, I remember that. I remember those days. I had that too. But some of the stuff that you wrote about in the book, I was like, okay, I haven't that I'm aware of. I have not had embezzlement yet, right? I mean, hopefully never.
Hopefully never.
Haven't had.
Well, I would think a law firm, the stakes are a little higher. If I were to steal from someone, I don't know if I'd steal from a law firm.
Okay, well, that makes me feel so much better. Yeah. Our financial controls are pretty strict because of trust accounting and all that. Right. But it's I have friends.
Oh, I'm sure it has.
It's happened for
somewhere,
sure.
Yeah.
So you've been through embezzlement, which has its own set of like issues because it's such a betrayal. It was your bookkeeper that you trusted.
An emotional roller coaster.
Yes.
I blame myself because I kind of set up the situation that allowed it to happen, and then I blame myself for prosecuting. Yes. And then I just, to me, it was like, why am I mad at myself? Why am I feeling bad for myself? I didn't steal anything, but it took a while to get to that point. But I was, right up through the trial, I was filled with self-doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Am I messing up someone's life? Right. And then I had to figure out, well, no, that person messed up their life.
Right.
This is just, paying this is just consequences now.
Yes. So for our watchers and listeners who haven't read the book, we'll just give some background. Like, this was your trusted bookkeeper that you had for years and years.
Yeah, 13 years altogether.
Yes. And as the business grew, you kind of you had more freedom to do things, go on vacations, things like that, and sort of release some of the control of the business, as I think most of us do, because you can't carry it all on your back forever, right? As the business owner, like at some point you have to release control if you ever want it to scale and grow, which is scary. But, you know, sometimes it happens just sort of unknowingly, little by little, you release the control. And so one day you basically discovered, okay, a couple $1,000s has been stolen.
Right.
And then upon further...
Credit card fraud, yeah.
Yeah.
Simple.
Upon further investigation, you realized it was over 100,000, like 130,000, right?
Yeah, far cry from a few credit cards, yeah.
Yes. So as you sit here today, and then you decided to basically press charges and went through that whole process, that whole legal process, and that was difficult for you, as you mentioned, like you were thinking, should I not have done that? Maybe that was too harsh. But as you sit here today, what do you think about that decision to actually pursue legal charges?
Yeah, I stand by the decision. Mainly because this went on for, that we could figure out about 5 years, but 5 or 6 years. The only reason we know it's at least 5 or 6 years and we're not sure if it was longer is because we couldn't get any more records from the bank before that. And it was maniacal, and it was, I mean, it was crazy, the lengths that a bookkeeper would go to steal money. And the one event that really made me pursue it, whenever I feel like, did I do the right thing? I think of this one event. I was on a cruise with my wife, it was our 25th wedding anniversary, and my daughter and her boyfriend, and we're on this cruise, and we're sailing into Greece, and this is before we had internet on the ship, right? So my BlackBerry, dating myself, BlackBerry went off as we pulled into Athens, and I got a cell service, and it was like, you know, a text, 911 call, you know, emergency. So I called in, and she said, I made a terrible mistake. It was totally my fault. I overpaid some invoices, and some money that was promised didn't come in, and I can't cover payroll. We'd never missed a payroll, ever. I mean, even when things were like really bad, we'd never missed a payroll.
Right.
So, you know, back then, there was no such thing as online banking. So I had no way to transfer money. I had the money in my personal bank account, but I had no way to transfer the money. So I had to call my mother. And I felt like I was 5. You know, I had to call my mother and go, "Can you transfer, you know, this money? It's a accounting error. As soon as I get back, I'll pay you back." So I was embarrassed, and I just felt vulnerable and stupid and all that. Yeah. Well, I found out later she had stolen that money. There was no accounting error. There was no crisis. That was just another ruse of many. Right. And that moment kind of solidified that this was ruthless. This was not a child who needed an operation.
Yes, I remember that in the book.
This was not a gambling debt.
Like, the
mob was about to kill her. You know.
By the way, I mean, that doesn't excuse theft or embezzlement.
But that would give me a different
But maybe,
attitude.
it's a different explanation. This was literally and I think you mentioned, like, you know, she started showing up with like designer purses and clothes and, you know, stuff like that. New teeth. You're like, I want those teeth.
I told the prosecutor when he said, "Can you just work things out?" Because the prosecutor just was not interested in pursuing this. And I went to every, you know how many hearings there are.
Yes, I sure do, yes.
I went to every one, and I had to keep reminding the prosecutor who I was because he always forgot. I'm the victim here.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Can you just work something out?" And, you know, I said, "No, I want 2 things. I want her in jail, and I want her teeth."
And I want those
but
damn teeth.
I said it in a little bit more expressive way. And the whole courtroom looked at me. And then I had to explain to the prosecutor that, no, I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't mean that literally.
Yes, but you paid for the teeth.
I feel like I paid for a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. None of it was, you know, a child surgery or education. It was all bling. And so that, I don't have any doubt I did the right thing. It was $130,000. And you know, we were a much smaller business then than we are now. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And every time she said, "Mike, we need more money," I would just work extra hours. I was working. I would go in on a Monday and not come home till a Wednesday. Wow. And I was traveling all over the world, just shaking trees and waiting for coconuts to fall and get more business. And the whole time, she's like, "Thank you," and she's skimming off the top. So, yeah.
Well, I highlighted a bunch of stuff in your book, but one of the things I highlighted, because I was like, there is no truer word spoken than this, is you wrote, because you had a couple different legal matters through the course of the years, this being one of them, but a couple other lawsuits came your way as well. And you wrote, unlike television courtroom procedurals, the real legal world moves at a uniquely slow and awkwardly deliberate pace. And I was like, clients, do you see this?
Yeah.
Like, that's probably one of the most, frustrating
Expedite
things.
has a whole new meaning in the legal world. Expedite means 6 months instead of a year.
Exactly. Yes, that's absolutely true. I was just literally on an emergency hearing yesterday that they're going to handle in February. I'm like, that's what an emergency is in the legal world.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I think I could have named the book The Reluctant Defendant, rather than...
Yes, you did have. Yeah, you did go through a couple legal processes.
My ex-employer decided that he didn't want another competitor. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. But you came out on top pretty much on all of them.
11 causes of action. We won 11 out of 11.
Yeah.
And were awarded attorney's fees, which we never received. But yeah, it was. But when I tried to settle that lawsuit, even though I strongly believed I didn't do anything wrong, and I said, let's just settle this. And he just started laughing and said, you think this is about, going to court? You're never going to make it to court. You'll be bankrupt before you ever get to court. I'll make sure of that. And he was very close to being right.
Yes. So I highlighted this line too, because you talk a little bit about your relationship with your dad in the book, and what and sort of proving to him and maybe others that you could do this. You weathered several different legal issues, people suing you, stuff like that. And so this line in the book says, second, my business would never have been started without both the desire to prove something to my father and his unexpected willingness to support you, because ultimately he gave you the loan to start it.
Yeah.
But this line resonated with me because I have a business coach that says, when you really get down underneath the surface of any entrepreneur, we all did it out of some sense of like anger, some sense of having to prove something to someone.
It myself. Yeah.
Yes. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I had a passion for a product. That was the genesis of my company. I wanted this product to see the world.
Right.
And the world to see the product.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to get other people to do it. And that didn't work out.
Yeah.
They weren't interested. So I decided to do it myself. And then two things were really, I think, the hallmark of my of the perseverance that I had when things got difficult. One was my father, and he was he was a tough guy. He was a Eastern European immigrant, and my mother was Scottish. He was Polish. They came to the United States in 1957, had me in 60 and my sister a few years later. So as a child of immigrants, the Scottish, they're chill. The Eastern European mentality, particularly in that generation, World War II, all of that, was we're going to get stuff done. We're going to be serious. We're not going to mess around. And no sense of humor.
Wow.
Constantly angry at something, and holding the bar very, very high.
Yeah.
So I always felt like I could never satisfy him. And then when I made smart decision to drop out of college, that almost killed him, because he, with all the struggles he went through, he still managed to get a college education, get a professional job.
Yeah.
And I had that handed to me on a silver platter, and I just went, no thanks.
Right.
I don't need that. This young punk.
Yeah.
So I had that kind of chip on my shoulder. I had something to prove.
Yeah.
And I was always trying to get the attention and adoration of my father,
The
because
approval.
he didn't hand them out very often.
Right.
Intentionally, because he wanted to keep them valuable and rare, right? So they meant something.
Yes.
There was a twisted, he thought he was doing the right thing. It was kind of a
course.
twisted logic, but I understood. It came from a good place.
Right.
So I was really desperate for that. So that was one motivation.
Yes.
Like, this legitimately is a good reason to stop doing business. I should stop now. But then I have to face my father. And then the lawsuit.
Yeah.
When my former employer sued me
Yes.
and tried to put us out of business,
Right.
I had something to prove.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of like emotional parent stuff and a little bit of just classic revenge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
getting the approval of my father on one hand and getting revenge on the other hand was really the motivation.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of attributes that entrepreneurs start a business with that could not be started without those attributes.
Right.
My attributes were, well, on the good side, I had good technical skills. You know, I knew what I was doing technically. On the other hand, the attributes I brought to the table were ego, arrogance, naivety, a very poor assessment of risk, and those are attributes that will kill a business. I mean, if you ran your law firm today based on ego and naivety and arrogance, and I mean, you wouldn't last, a second. But I could not start a business without that.
Right.
Because the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that 70% of all businesses fail. That's just a fact.
Right.
70%. Why? Because it's risky. It's really difficult. And I believe 70% of all businesses fail, not because business in itself is inherently dangerous, but because the people who start them don't shift to a new skill set.
Yeah.
They're still running on ego.
They give up.
Or they give up.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I thank my dad and I thank the lawsuit for never stopping. And I'm thankful that I knew there were things I didn't know.
Yes.
And I would show up to work with a magic wand. It was crazy, Holly. I would just wave my wand and things would magically happen.
Yeah.
I'd wave my wand, we'd get more money. I'd wave my wand and arguments within the staff would go away. I customers wouldn't be angry. I just wave my wand.
Right.
And one day I went into the office and I pulled out my trusty wand and did that like Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. My wand stopped working. My Harry Potter wand stopped working. I was no longer a wizard. And then I realized someone rewrote the rules. And I didn't get the memo.
Right.
So I'm like, oh man. So I need to come up with new rules. What are the new rules? I need new skills.
Or a better wand.
Or a better wand. Trust me, I looked for years for a new wand, and the wand days were over. Wizard no more. But wizardry can also be obtained through finding new skills, finding new potions, finding new spells. Right. And so I had to either learn those skills or acquire those skills through hiring. Yeah. And a little bit of both.
Right.
And eventually I realized that a pulse and a willingness to accept what I pay is no longer the sole attributes to work on our team.
Right.
So I made a decision that if I'm in a room of staff, of team members, I need to be the stupidest person in the room.
Yeah.
And I consider myself pretty bright. I need to be the stupidest person in the room, on average.
Right.
Because if I can surround myself with people smarter than me, more skilled than me, more balanced than me, all these different attributes, then my business cannot fail.
Right.
And I think I could be in the 30% that succeed. It's not that business is dangerous. It is that running a business with a startup mentality forever is dangerous.
Right. Well, when I read your book, I think the thing that was just really at the forefront of my mind the most is how important personal development is for a business owner. Because you have to be willing to die to your ego. You have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be completely okay and willing, not just okay, but willing to have everybody around you be smarter than you. And I just saw something yesterday that talked about how a CEO is a really scary position to be in because basically your entire job is to solve the hardest problems that nobody else can solve. But in the course of your being a CEO and owning a business, you're trying to hire people every day that are all smarter than you. And so now you arrive at the point where everybody who was smarter than you that you hired because they're smarter than you can't still solve this problem. Yeah. It's back on you.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a filter. You're only solving the unsolvable problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So, that all those people that you hired because they were smarter than you still could not solve.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, they hand it back and they filter out all the easy stuff.
Yes.
And give you the hardest stuff. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Then it comes to a lot of gut and experience.
Yeah.
That's one thing about hiring people smarter than you. There's two ways to evaluate, quote unquote smartness. One is, educational smartness, and the other is experience.
Yeah.
And not everyone carries the experience. When I hire really talented, smart people, they weren't there from the beginning.
Right.
They weren't there.
Yeah.
They didn't have something to prove to their father. They didn't, they're not trying to get revenge for a lawsuit. So that is something that uniquely the founder carries.
Yes.
And that is super valuable.
Right.
Super, super valuable.
Yes.
But I think the most important thing to remember is what gets you from A to B does not get you from B to C.
What got you to here
generally
won't
fails
get you
you
to the next level.
Yeah.
Yes. So I highlighted that too, because in the book, at the start of the book, you're talking about, entrepreneurs and how we're kind of just a weird breed, or weird, rare breed.
Very frustrating to work for.
Yes. Oh, I always say all the time, I would get fired probably from any job I ever had.
We are the worst employees.
Oh, yeah.
We get fired on day one.
Yes.
Because we would just go, no.
No, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes. But you wrote, our being entrepreneurs, our unique perspective on life and opportunities fuels our ability to create something from nothing. This creation process nourishes our entrepreneurial soul and propels us toward success. However, time runs out more quickly for entrepreneurs. Our skills are often best suited for the startup phase of a company's growth. Ironically, what builds us up can also tear us down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I don't think that all the smart people we hire are necessarily capable of starting a company.
Right.
And I don't think the people who start companies are necessarily capable of sustaining them.
Right.
Right. I look at Richard Branson as kind of I'll say a mentor. I've never met the guy, but at least an anecdotal mentor, in that he owns upwards of 100 different companies. Some of them were very, visible, Virgin Records,
right,
which failed.
Yeah.
Because technology changed. Virgin Trains, Virgin Mobile, which are, cell phones in the UK. Virgin
Atlantic, the airline.
Right.
It was my favorite airline, and then it went away.
No, Virgin Atlantic's still here. Virgin America went away.
Okay.
And who bought them?
Alaska.
Alaska bought them. Yeah. And he also owned Virgin Australia, Virgin Blue. I mean, all these different things.
Yeah.
But what he learned is kind of the hard way is he's not good at running companies. He is their ambassador. He's a brand ambassador because he's
a visionary,
rich kind of playboy adventurer, ballooner, whatever. He does crazy things, and he's very visible, and he's got a lot of power behind the brand.
Right.
And cool.
Yeah.
In Austin Powers kind of way. Very non-PC, Austin Powers kind of way.
I love that.
But he knows enough to know that he is not the person to run the company. So he hires very capable teams to run his companies. And I think he has a much greater track record today than he did before when he was the one trying to run the company.
Right.
And I think that I think the reason 70% of all businesses fails is because maybe through ego or other factors that the founder does not get out of their own way.
Right.
They think that I got here, therefore I can keep going. And the rules change. Someone changes the rules, all of a sudden what worked fails.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for people like us who, just say, I'm going to do this on my own in spite of all the risks.
Right.
We're special. It won't happen to us.
Yes.
That mentality makes it difficult to turn over control or at least turn over operations and direction to another team.
Yeah.
Because we think we know it all.
Yeah.
Because, look at where we are,
Right.
So I think business is not as risky as the statistics imply. If people are willing to get out of their own way. Yeah. Know that they don't know things. Know those things or get someone who knows those things. Right. And be willing to adapt and most importantly, just get out of their own way. Yeah. And I think if more business owners had that mentality, the stats would change. Right. Maybe from 70-30 to 30-70. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard the saying, but I've heard the saying. Maybe it's because my business coach tells me the saying, but there are no business problems. There's just you problems.
Like,
yeah. I used to say that I would have the perfect business if it wasn't for employees, vendors, and customers.
Right. Yes.
I'm sure there's times you can go home and say that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But ultimately, I realized that none of those were the problem. The problem was me.
Right.
It was me the whole time.
Yes.
And one thing I've learned, Holly, is there's a difference between an aha moment. Mm-hmm. Most of the aha moments I've had them and then realized, wait a minute, I already learned this. I just didn't realize I learned this.
Oh.
And so, like when our business was really doing poorly, we were in the middle of the lawsuit. We had run out of money, all the startup money. Thanks, Dad. It now went to the lawyer.
Right.
We were out of cash, so little cash that a customer called to place an order. We didn't have money to buy parts.
Yeah.
So, without hesitation, without fear, without any forethought, I said, okay, it's half down. You got to put half down. Mm-hmm. And our machines cost tens of thousands, back then cost tens of thousands of dollars. So that was a lot of money. And of course, every customer went, are you crazy?
Yeah.
What are you smoking? I'm not going to pay you half down.
Right.
And like, okay.
Yeah.
No pushback, no argument.
Yep.
Like, you know what? If I were you, I'd say the same thing. I get it. But those are our terms.
Right.
Everyone paid half down.
Yeah.
They all bitched and moaned about it, but they all paid half down.
Right.
That was not a decision. That was like, it was survival.
Yeah,
when
you
people,
had to do it.
In the tragic situations, and we've seen it, on the news before, people will jump out of a building that's on fire to their death.
Right.
Who would jump out of a building? Well, if the choice is a fire behind you, there's a 1 in a million chance you'll survive the fall. There's a 0 chance that you'll survive the fire. So people do that. This was my jump out of building.
Yeah.
It's not a decision. It was like,
I have to do this to survive. Yeah.
Then later, financial crisis over, we start doing long terms. We start having people not pay us, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, we should start requiring deposits. And like, oh no, we can't because people won't order from us. They the fear-based decision. But wait a minute, we already learned it doesn't cause a problem.
Right.
When we just did it.
Yeah.
So that's the example of, and there's a dozen of those things, of things I've learned and then forgotten and then had to relearn.
Right.
and they were already, it's like the universe says, hey, Holly, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a shortcut. And the universe shows you. It doesn't stick. The universe then goes, the business gods.
Yeah.
I'm speaking totally metaphorically.
Yeah.
The business gods will say, Holly, I'm going to show you this trick. And Holly goes, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
okay,
I'll show you again. I'll show you later.
Yeah.
I'll show you later. No problem, Holly.
You'll learn this lesson one way or the other.
I'll show you again when it means more.
Right.
And then eventually you go,
wow.
And then you realize, wait a minute, I remember this before.
Yes.
And suddenly you realize it's not your great idea. It was already demonstrated to you. And that happened over and over and over. So I used to kick myself, judgmental, self-judgment about, first half of the book, as you said, is all the mistakes I ever made, all the trials and literally and tribulations we went through. And I would kick myself like, I'm not that good. Maybe I'm more lucky than good, right? And then I through business coaches and things like that, through mentors, I just started recalculating. Well, wait a minute, those were assignments almost by the business gods.
Yeah.
Run this assignment. Go up this hill, capture the flag,
right?
And get shot up in the process because you'll learn you'll learn how to take less bullets later.
Right.
You'll learn something. And I realized that all of the mistakes I ever made were really positive change agents, right? I would not be the person I am today without those.
Absolutely.
Today I'm grateful for the recession.
Yes.
I'm grateful for the pandemic. I'm grateful, that's a bad example because people's lives were ruined by that. But you know what I mean.
But
I'm grateful for the lawsuit. I'm grateful that my father was tough on me and I had something to prove. I'm grateful for running out of money and having to change our terms, impulsively.
Yes.
All those things created the character, created the experience, created the confidence.
Right.
That we could make decisions that are far less scary than any of those things.
Yes.
And have a positive outcome.
Absolutely. We had a Stoic on the show once, and this is the concept called amor fati, the Latin term amor fati, which means the love of one's fate. And it's really having a lot of gratitude and, thankfulness for all the things that you've had to endure, because it created who you are today. It created the business that you have today. It created the character that you have today. But for all those things that you have to endure and learn how to cope with and get through, it wouldn't be as it is today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were necessary lessons.
Yes.
If, for lack of a better word, toward mastery.
Right. Yeah.
And without them, I would not be where I am today. My business would not be where it is today. My team would not be where they are today.
Right.
The industry would not be where it is today.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for those things. And I hated them.
Oh, they're so
in
hard.
real time.
Yes, it's so
why
hard.
Why is this happening?
Yes.
But it was that was my college experience.
Yes.
That was my
yes.
That was
Even
my
though you dropped out of college, yes.
Little did I know, I joined another university.
You sure did. Yes.
One without diplomas or frat parties or
right.
sorority girls or
Yeah, just a lot of tough lessons.
Just a lot of tough lessons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you went through so much to get to where you are, and then sort of the last half of the book talks about all the shifts that you had to make. You made shifts in how you hired team. You made shifts in how you guys did advertising and marketing. You even made shifts in how you sort of presented your product in terms of the pricing and the terms and all of that. How, for people watching this that are business owners, feeling entrepreneurial or whatever, how do you know what is the right shift to make? When do you make the shift? What's the right choice? How do you know that?
For me, I had to discern what is a fear-based decision from what is a decision. Mm-hmm. What's the right move?
Right.
And a business coach that I worked with, who was, she would not appreciate me saying this, but I would refer to her as Yoda. Okay. Not physically.
Yes.
But in terms of just like almost spiritually, she had this gift of seeing things and almost like tea leaves. Like
yes.
She'll pull things out of
right.
seemingly just random, bits of trivia.
Yes.
And she taught me there's two things that block the discernment whether something is the right decision, and that's the lens of time and money. And I'd say, I think we need to do this. We need to build this new product design or whatever, but I don't know. It's going to cost too much to do it, and a trade show's coming up in 6 months, and there's no way we can have it done in 6 months, so we're just not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, what would the decision be if you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world to build it? Like, well,
definitely yes.
Of course, of
right.
course. Mm-hmm. So that's the right decision. Figured out.
Yeah,
that's the right decision. And that sounds so simplistic, hearing it back now in my own words, but that was like, oh my God.
Right.
So I started looking at all these things, all these decisions that I really needed to make that were critical to the business, but I was too afraid to make them. Mm-hmm. And I took time and money off the table. And some of the decisions were, well, even if I had all the money, it would still be a stupid move. Right?
Yes.
Like, hey, I think we should buy a Learjet. There's no time and all the money.
Yeah.
That would never be a good decision.
Okay, don't rain on my parade.
For my business.
Right, for you.
For my business. But a bigger boat, maybe. But,
okay, yes.
So some of the decisions still didn't make it through. So that was definitely a bad decision. But many of the decisions were like, well, yeah, that is the right decision. We just don't have the money or the time to do it.
Right.
And then once we came to the realization that that's the right decision, we found the money and the time. That worked itself out.
It's amazing how those things unfold when you decide.
You kind of manifest it.
Absolutely.
In a way, without sounding like too hocus pocus, voodoo, whatever, new agey, all the.
That's just the way
terms.
Energy works, though.
It works
is you
that
decide,
way.
and then 100%. It is delivered to you.
100%.
Yeah.
But if you're waffling, like I can't make the decision, you have not given the universe a signal to manifest it.
Right.
It's like, oh, Holly's not ready. Mike's not ready.
Yeah.
We're just going to hold off. We'll help someone else right now. We'll come back to you when you know what you want.
Yeah.
So that worked for me.
Yeah. Okay. Now we talked a little bit about this off camera, but I think it's good stuff and it's valuable to kind of revisit it, which is sort of your view on marketing, because you guys used to do marketing such a different way.
We were so awful.
Well, I mean, you did the best.
We were the
time.
Larry H. Parker of
in
our industry.
Yes,
right? I'll get you $10 million for that stub finger.
Yeah,
we were those people.
Right. Very flashy. Very
all respect toward other injury attorneys.
Yes.
By the way.
Yeah.
There's my next book.
Right. Yeah. But you would go to trade shows and you would really wow the people with, waterfalls and magicians and flashy stuff.
Yeah.
And you really boasted your product, like you pushed your product.
We're the best.
Yes.
They suck. We're great.
Right.
Yeah. Those were almost verbatim our ads. Yeah.
Okay. And then somewhere along the line, you really shifted that to more educational based marketing, more value, like really trying to deliver value. So was it just, sort of the universe teaching you the lesson in the way that the universe does, or how did you make that shift?
Sometimes the universe is subtle. Frequently it's subtle.
Yes.
And you have to hear it a few times to really. This was sledgehammer. The universe said, "Okay, we're tired of being subtle, Mike. You're going to take a sledgehammer." So we did a show. We had a 30-foot wide, 16-foot high waterfall that dropped droplets in the shape of words and
oh my gosh,
figures.
amazing!
It was awesome. And I'm feeling like, oh man, it cost me $75,000 to rent it for 3 days, right?
Oh my gosh.
Plus the cost of the booth space and all of the equipment we had in the booth, and all of our equipment is on wheels. It's big, but it's all on wheels so that we could wheel it in and out of the trade show. And it's all in front of the waterfall, and it's looking just beautiful. And I'm kind of second guessing myself. Did I go too far with this?
Yeah.
And then a guy came up and said, "Hey, Mike, this is the most awesome booth I've ever seen." And I'm just like feeling a little better about that crazy investment. And he said, "Do you mind if I take a picture? Because you're not supposed to take pictures. Do you mind if I take a picture of the booth? This is just amazing. I want to show my whole team." I'm like, "Please." And then he looked at our equipment, looked down at the bottom.
Can
saw
we
it was
move
on
all
wheels.
your
That's what he
products
said.
out
He
of
goes,
the way?
"Can we move your products out of the way?"
Oh my gosh.
And I think I said no, but it wasn't just like no. It was like, "F you, no."
Like, yes.
Like it's like you're telling me you like the backdrop, but move my kids out of the way because you want the backdrop.
Yeah.
Like, no. So, and it just hit me with the sledgehammer. The universe said, "Okay, Mike, we're done." Boom, and like whack-a-mole. And I realized, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We don't sell waterfalls.
Right.
We're not. We don't perform at Magic Castle. We're not magicians. We're all these things that we're doing is just noise. Just noise. We were obnoxious. We were just creating noise.
Yeah.
And we'd won all these awards and so many that it became toxic.
Yeah.
So many.
I wrote this down on my sticky note. I wrote the word vanity because I think sometimes
exactly what it was.
Yeah, I think sometimes
it's ego and vanity.
Totally. Yes.
Totally.
And it's hard to let go of that.
It is, because my ego was my trusted companion and my bodyguard. But it was also my anchor.
Yeah, well, it's safe. It feels safe.
It was my propeller and my anchor all together. So I didn't want to let it go because it's what got me through.
Yes.
Things that I should not have been able to get through.
Right.
It's like sheer perseverance.
Perseverance.
And ego.
Right.
And so I kind of respected my ego. It never let me down.
Right.
But it was an anchor, and I knew I needed to.
Yeah.
And it's not about me. It's not about how cool our products are. It's about customers have an issue that needs to be solved. They don't understand that the issue can be solved with our products because they don't understand the issue.
Right.
We need to talk about the issue they're having. And it's super technical, but they didn't draw the line. So I'm guilty of coming up with phrases that I learned have been developed already.
You thought you invented them?
I thought it was mine.
Okay.
I thought it was mine. And there's two that I'll drop on you that it turns out, no, they're already out there.
Okay.
One is
We'll
the concept of, trademark Mike Konrad.
Yeah.
One is the concept of guided discovery.
Okay.
So Holly, I want you to conclude that reading that book is the best thing you should do for yourself. I can tell you, Holly, read that book. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Or we can talk about all the problems you may be having in business and the solutions to those problems. And there's a resource that explains what those solutions are. Holly then says, based on the information, I think I'm going to get that book.
Yeah.
I'm not hyping the book. it's a good example because it's right in front of me.
Get the book.
Yeah, on Amazon. Available. Call now. Offers are standing by. Batteries not included. That's the old Mike hiking stuff, right?
Comes with a waterfall.
Comes with a waterfall. Just move the book out of the way, right?
Right.
So I realized that we need to provide the facts and the data so that the customer can conclude like, oh yeah, this is the problem. I get that. What are the solutions to the problems? And then they draw the line. And when they draw the line, they fall on their sword over that decision.
Right.
And how do we get that out there? Another term I coined, which I turned out I did not, so I'm not taking full credit for it. I thought I had. Is this concept called conscious marketing, which is not talking about yourself, providing value. So I'm a big believer that whenever, I'll use me as an example, just to keep my ego. It doesn't get fed much anymore, so I'll feed him here's a little treat.
Throw him a bone.
Here's a bone.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm in front of a microphone, behind a lectern, in front of a camera, like this one, or writing a paper or anything like that, writing a book, I need to provide value. Value is not talking about how great I am or my business is or my product is. That's not value. That's my value. There's no value to them.
Right.
Value is something that they can receive and be smarter as a result of, or have more knowledge in a certain thing.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm providing value, I am also building authority. And here's a term that I think is important, and I hate the term because other people have exploited the term, but become an influencer. Now, I'm not talking about Kardashian, TikTok, influencer. I'm talking about an authority-based influencer.
Yeah.
I know nothing about your specialty of law, thankfully.
Right.
And although there were times during this business,
I can imagine,
I probably would have met you sooner,
right?
Under different contexts. But I know nothing about that. But quite honestly, tomorrow, I've watched many of your podcasts in preparation for today's conversation, and I'd never heard of you before.
Yeah.
And I can say this with all sincerity. If tomorrow a friend called me and said, do you know a good family law practice? I would say, I know this person called, Holly Moore, and she seems very competent, and I've never heard you give one bit of advice on legal matters, ever.
Right, yeah.
But you come across as an authority.
Yeah.
Just from what you do, which is not selling your practice.
Right.
But I think this podcast is probably a really good thing for your practice in ways that the binary world does not, the analog world or the digital world does not understand.
Right.
The analog world, it's not just ones and zeros. There's something in between. That world will understand that.
Right.
And that's kind of the concept that I thought we should start doing. And we've done everything else. We've done the circus act. We were Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. We had like, it wasn't a 3-ring circus. We were a 6-ring circus. And letting go of that was really hard because I enjoyed the buzz. I enjoyed it. We were like high-tech carnies. We were
high-tech carnies.
We were just like this crazy traveling circus and carnival. And I miss that to this day. I miss that, but I don't miss the results we got from that.
Right. Yeah.
What I really am just super stoked about is seeing this new concept new for me. New concept work. Yeah. So well. Way better than the old ways did it.
Right.
And I can see a direct correlation in a very indirect, world. Yeah. How can me coming on this show, talking about business, even come back to my world, my technical world? It does. It does. In ways I cannot explain.
Right.
And then I'm the type of personality where I need to understand how everything works. When I was a kid, I used to get in all sorts of trouble because I would take all my parents' appliances apart.
Oh, you take them apart. Yes. You're very
where I got in trouble was I did not have the same interest in putting everything back together.
Right, yes.
But I need to know how things work.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating when I don't know how something works. And I don't know how this works. What I know is it works.
Right.
And I kind of know philosophically,
Yeah.
equal exchange of energy,
Yes.
you know,
Right.
and okay, I get all that, but I want to draw the line. I want to see.
I know you want to see. Okay,
I want to see
this
cause effect.
client came from this
Exactly.
podcast episode.
Exactly.
I know it doesn't work that way though.
And I ended up, as we talked about before we started recording, I liken it to the old days of the steam train. You know, the steam train had 2 employees on it: the engineer who drove the train, and the fireman who stoked the fire. So the fireman would take a shovel and throw bits of coal into the furnace, and the coal would burn, it would boil the water, create pressure, move the train down the track. And the fireman never knew which lump of coal took them from mile 1 to mile 2.
Yeah.
All the fireman's job was to build energy, put energy in the form of coal into the furnace, and the train goes down the track. I view now the podcast, the lectures that I do, the books, the technical articles, the webinars, the gigs, technical gigs, the conferences that I attend, all those things. It's just coal in the furnace.
Shoveling coal into
That's
the
all
furnace.
it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one does what. I just know that everything that I do that is not about me or specifically the business, but provides value is high energy.
Right. Yeah.
It's very efficient, high energy, and it moves our little train, my company, down the track.
Yeah.
It just does. And I will, maybe if I'm lucky, I'll live long enough to understand exactly why or how.
I mean, maybe
But I don't
we're
need
not
to.
supposed to
I don't need
understand.
to.
Yeah. It's interesting that we're having this conversation because I think it was maybe a week or 2 ago, I was in Atlanta at a business conference, and I think the marketing thought leaders are starting to shift their thinking toward, I mean, I know the thinking about providing value, that's been there for a bit, but I do think there's been more of a shift now where we don't have to say this lead came from this thing to keep doing this thing. I think there is a shift where it's like, no, we just keep shoveling that coal into the furnace and producing energy, giving out value, and it does come back. Yeah.
You know, look who learned that. Again, this is an example of, oh my gosh, I've already been shown this, and I think I'm just discovering it. Look at Nike.
Yes.
Show me an ad that Nike has ever run that talks about arch support, style,
It's not about
comfort,
their shoes. Yeah.
durability, the way the laces are designed, whatever.
Right.
None.
Yeah.
Most of their ads don't even show their shoe.
Right.
Most of their ads, they glorify athletes. And not just athletes. I saw an ad in their archive of a pudgy little overweight, 13-year-old running, saying the aspiration to do something good for their body. They celebrate athleticism and motivation and success.
Yes, absolutely.
Patagonia, same way.
Yeah.
There's a number of examples. Apple was very much the same way. Now they're a little bit into themselves, but they were more of the unique customer, the crazy ones as they called it.
Yes.
And being different and think different. That was all Apple.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm not discovering this. I'm like another class of students following another class of students.
That's very true.
We're all thinking we've discovered it. The teacher's just like, every year I get kids that think they discovered it.
The new class thinks they're all smart.
Exactly. So I'm just the latest class.
Right.
And probably a late starter in that class.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It works.
Right.
And it works so well.
Yes.
And at some point, it may not work again because the universe tends to say, okay, 2.0.
And then you'll have to shift again.
And then we'll shift again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on not only all of your success, but all of your failures too, because they got us here today.
Whoever thought we'd say that, right?
I know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Holly.
I've got just a little bit more to say. The conversation with Mike Konrad yet again reminds us that the failures are just as important, if not more important, than all the wins and successes. And even though they are so hard and they are difficult and painful to endure, they teach us so much. And we would not be who we are today and doing what we're doing today without all of that adversity. Never forget, you were made for more.